Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. With you as always, I'm Aaron, and with me as always is Dave and Fredo. How you doing, guys?
Good.
And so this episode is going to be kind of tis the season episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. It's going to be well, we were talking about the sound of music, and Fredo said he won't spin around on a mountain, but it's five of our favorite things. We're going to be. It's going to be not just about Star Wars. We kind of gave each other carte blanche to whatever, 2021, whatever we've been geeking out over, found new appreciation for. It's just going to give us a chance to, like I said, kind of highlight a few of our favorite things. So, but it's the Who Dat Jedi podcast, so we have to start with trivia. And so here we can we'll just do it as normal. I was going to give us each 6 questions. All right, so Fredo, you're up first. Who's nearly pounded into quote orange goo unquote for an accident on the streets of Tatooine? Who's nearly pounded into orange goo for an accident on the streets of Tatooine?
Yeah, until I said Tatooine, I was wondering who the heck you were talking about, but that would have been Jar Jar Binks.
That was Jar Jar Binks. Which, did we know that Gungans have orange blood now? Is that what we're to get from that?
I didn't think it was orange, but
because he's not orange. But all right, Dave. Whose head does Newt Gunray want on his desk before he'll sign Count Dooku's treaty? Whose head does Newt Gunray want on his desk before he'll sign Count Dooku's treaty?
I think it was Padme.
It was Padme Amidala's. He really didn't like her.
Well, she showed him up, so
I think we need a backstory there. Before the Phantom Menace, did he ask her out and she said no? Is he Star Wars first incel? Is that what this is?
Yeah,
they pulled a gun on each other. Well, I was going to say they pulled a gun on each other. I think that might be enough, maybe.
All right, here's mine. What ship's distinctive sound effect was created for A New Hope by mixing the whine of car tires on a wet road with the trumpet of an elephant? What ship's distinctive sound effect was created for A New Hope by mixing the whine of car tires on a wet road with the trumpet of an elephant? I'm going to say that's a TIE fighter. Yes, it was the TIE fighters. Ooh. That's something every time they have a feature on Star Wars and they talk to Ben Burtt about how he created the sounds, I'm enraptured by that. That's
fun stuff.
I could watch 2 hours on that, and they only give them like about 5 minutes, so
because what's amazing is when you think about it, that's the sound. You didn't know what a TIE fighter sounded until he put that in there, but that's their sound.
Oh yeah.
You don't think if somebody put the sound, like put a 65 Chevelle or something behind a TIE fighter, you'd be like, what the heck's wrong with that?
Yep. No, and and that's why I've said it a gazillion times. The lasers, the laser blasts in The Force Awakens, from Poe's rifle at the beginning, sounded so artificial. Whereas because we got used to this organic, laser blast sound, I mean, before I found out that the laser blasts were from hitting a wire. I mean, we used to hit a wire, because you'd get kind of a cool sound. Didn't realize that was the laser blast, but anyway. Well, all right. Well, let's move on to raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. Bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens. This person's messed up, let me tell you. Brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. So 2021, what has been geeking us out? What have we found new appreciation for? And again, this could be anything. And because I'm talking right now, I'm going to start it off so you guys don't steal my thunder here. But mine's the most recent one, and I'm just going to say the Beatles. Because I've always been a passive. I've enjoyed Beatles music. It's kind of like the Eagles. I mean, and it was actually a documentary that got me more into the Eagles as well. So I like the Beatles just fine, and I appreciate what they did for rock and roll. But I was never like I'm not like some of our friends out there who just that's
how the
their
podcast
thing.
Going through every song.
That's
ever.
that's their thing.
Yeah. We got to do a crossover with them at some point if they're agreeable to that.
I will tell you this: if you haven't watched the Get Back on Disney Plus, I'm not going to say that everybody has to, because it's. But if you've ever been in a band, or if you have any interest in group dynamics and how to manage different personalities, watch these 3 episodes. But it gave me such a greater appreciation for each member of the Beatles and what they brought to the table just in this, because the whole thing, this documentary of basically creating the Let It Be album is what it ends up being. But you just, again, and maybe it's because I've been in a band and I know creativity is easier than creativity and collaboration. And when you watch and then to do that as the biggest rock band to have ever walked the earth, I mean, it is just incredible to watch them navigate. And then also just to see some of these songs, like you get to see how Get Back was created. I mean, conceived. It was Paul McCartney just messing around on a bass, and he starts just kind of scatting, and then like eventually it's their next hit single. So to watch them in that creative process. But anyway, it gave me a more appreciation for the Beatles because they stopped performing in front of people. And they stopped being a band and became artists. They instead of being performers, they were artists. It was like they used albums just as a painter uses canvas and oils. And so that's what they did. They went in the recording studio and they created. And to watch that process is incredible. And I still contend that Ringo Starr is the most fortunate person on the planet. He's an awesome drummer, but watching him through this thing, he's actually probably the smartest one as well, because you have George, Paul, and John going round and round and round about how a song should be, and Ringo's just sitting back there smoking a cigarette. He plays his drums, he doesn't get overriled about anything. I think he knows, dude, I'm going to be able to ride this wave as long as I want. I'm not going to. You want me to do this on the drums? Sure, I'll try that, But anyway, so just if you've ever had to deal with group dynamics or been in a band, you need to watch this just because it's just, like I said, so now it's making me explore the Beatles catalog a little bit more, some songs that I didn't know were out there. So yeah, anyway, that's what I'm currently geeking out over.
Yeah, awesome. I was just going to say right quick, it was surprising when you start watching and go like the task that they set themselves up to, like record a whole new album in 28 days and then be ready to perform it live in front of a global audience. And you're like, most people would pick smaller Everest to climb, but they're like, we can do this.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So Fredo,
Dave, you want to go? Okay.
Fredo, go ahead.
I guess I'll go next. I guess what I've been geeking out most recently, since I'm going to go, I've been going back and rereading Dune. you and me and your lovely wife saw the movie in theaters, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the adaptation from Denis Villeneuve. So it kind of prompted me to go back and reread it and redid that. So I've been kind of just while reading the other books, whatever, and I'm just, it's one of those things that I'm like, Dune is a lot like Lord of the Rings or even Star Wars. It's something that's an icon. It sits on a pedestal, and people have to like reverently pass by on the way to discovering everything else in that field. Whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, movies, whatever. But sometimes, like when you kind of get to come back to it at a different point in life and get to see all the different stuff that it's hinting at, the different topics that it's touching upon, and it's one of those things that I think seeing it as a little kid, seeing the David Lynch movie, as a little 7-year-old, kind of blew my mind, and then seeing this version, it kind of gives me appreciation for how difficult it is to take something that's on a written page and bring it to life, because the perception I had reading the book is one. The adaptations that I've seen now are 3 different adaptations I've seen now. But then you start finding all the artists have been influenced by it and who, will take it and run with it. And it's just fascinating to see how different people interpret the same written words on a different canvas. But yeah, I've been enjoying it tremendously. I enjoyed it tremendously watching it in the theaters. I saw it again in HBO, and then it just made me want to go back and start picking up some of the stuff in that universe, because it's very interesting, and it forces you to start thinking about different things. And I don't know, it's kind of put me in a good place to kind of start looking at some of the other stuff that I've been, again, pillars, columns, stuff that's on a pedestal, and kind of reassess it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had never read it. I had never seen any of the other adaptations before, and Kate got sat me down and was like, okay, you got to watch the David Lynch one, and then we'll watch the new one. And I enjoyed them both because they were both so different from one another. And I think, again, that sort of speaks to the source material being its own entity as well. It's like they have these voiceovers in the Lynch version, which is like them thinking, but it's like them projecting their thoughts outward, which, if you think about the plot line of some of the story elements, it actually it kind of makes sense for them to do that. Even it would be awkward, and it is a little awkward, but like, given the fact that they have these telepathic kinds of abilities, you getting into their head and hearing their inner dialogue actually is really kind of an interesting style choice, because like, you're not going to be able to hear those thoughts that are written on the page when you just try to act it out. You're not inside the characters' heads in the same way that you would be if you're reading it. And so I thought like that was a really interesting choice. And then again, I was equally interested by the new version. And they're like, well, we're not doing that because it's kind of weird to be doing that. We're gonna approach this a completely different way. And I liked both.
And you can tell the difference between, say, somebody like David Lynch, who was influenced by a lot of impressionist 60s, early 70s experimental movie making stuff, would dare do something like that, versus somebody like Denis Villeneuve, who's very much a modern cinema filmmaker, whose influence is Star Wars.
Right.
So they're both coming at the same thing, but the things that have formed their minds and their processes are wildly different.
Dave, what's your first favorite thing?
I'm going to start with video games. So I played a lot of games for the first time this year, and a lot of them got a thumbs up. A lot of good gaming done, but I'd say there were only 5 that I'd say that were must plays for people, and the one that was at the top of the list was Katamari Damacy, which
oh yeah, that one.
I'll explain. It's it's a game where you basically are pushing like a little sort of magnetic ball around, and you're like this little guy, and you're pushing this ball, and you're rolling it around your environment. And as you come into contact with things, they stick to the ball. And so it's like the snowball effect, where you push in a snowball down the side of a mountain, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just gets huge. And so you doing this, that's the dynamic of the game, is you're trying to get this ball as big as you can make it. And so you can't roll over just anything. This is the trick to the game. You can't roll over anything when you first start out. You don't have enough mass and momentum to pull that off. So you have to start small and then roll over things that are a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And eventually you're rolling over things like battleships and skyscrapers. And it's such a fun game. And it was something that I'd missed on original release. This came out like back in like 2004-ish, something like that. And totally flew by. I'd been aware of it, but it wasn't anything that I'd actually sought out. I was like, well, that looks kind of cool, but I'm not going to drop $50 on it. Whatever, moving on. And so I was able to circle back to it with the Switch. It goes on. It's on modern platforms. I think it's on Steam now. Goes on sale periodically. I could not recommend this game more to people. It is so much fun, and there's something sort of innocent about it as well. In that you're not like, shooting your gun at some bad guy or whatever, and there's blood everywhere, and it's not Grand Theft Auto or anything. You're just rolling a ball, and it's real weird too, like really Japanese. Highly Japanese.
No offense to our Japanese listeners out there.
I mean, like, there's a thing that there's a dynamic there. If you've like consumed Japanese culture at all, especially in like video games that never got an American release, if you go back and you play some of these games, like, it's like there's not even a better description for it than this game is very Japanese. It's not an insult. It's amazing. I love it. It's so much fun. Best new game that I experienced this year.
By the way, Dave, right now I just want to look. It's on sale in the Switch store, in the digital store, for $7.49.
That is a steal. That is a bargain. Pull the trigger. Do it.
Will do.
So my next favorite thing is, again, in the music vein here, and I've mentioned it on this podcast before, and it's Rick Beato's YouTube channel.
What's up, everyone? Today on Riffs Ranked, we're going to do some AC/DC.
It appeals to the trained musical geek in me, because he goes, like, one of his big things on there is what makes this song great, and he goes through songs from, it's from the 70s all the way to current day, and he'll go through and he'll go through the entire song of what, he'll analyze the melody, he'll talk about how he'll solo tracks so you can hear what the bass player is doing, what the guitar player is doing. So it's fascinating just to see how these things are put together. And he gets into, a lot of music theory. So, like, they're going from this chord to that chord to this chord, and this is why. And so it's making me reminisce to my undergrad, which is kind of weird that I find that exciting. But But then he also, what's really cool, it appeals to another population where he'll listen to Spotify's top 10 songs. And he'll just kind of give a, reaction of, oh yeah, this is a good song because it's doing this, or yeah, this is catchy, but it's, it's candy, so he'll go through the stuff that's popular now. And as a guy who's probably of my vintage, maybe a little bit older, maybe my brother's age, to be, to not just be stuck in the 70s and 80s, but to, show some reverence for stuff that's being released today, I think makes it really appealing. So it's a really cool channel. And he just recently had an interview with Sting, which was fascinating. It was just fascinating to listen to him talk creating music with Sting. So anyway, that's Rick Beato's YouTube channel. So give it a whirl. There's a lot of stuff on there. Anywhere from beginning music theory to, like I said, just the what makes this song great stuff. So yeah, check it out.
That's really been my favorite of his, the what makes this song great, because and he'll do every kind of song. He reconstructed AC/DC's Back in Black because he got hit with a YouTube copyright strike. So he decided, okay, well, if a cover won't get me that, so he basically recorded all pieces so he could break it down. But I think my favorite ones are when he did Rush. I forget which Rush songs he did, and then he did a couple of Tool songs, which again is just very interesting when he start breaking all the layers down.
Yeah,
on very punk rock. It's like, okay, let's actually take a look at what these 3 or these 4 guys did and just kind of ripping it apart and show you all the inner pieces and how it all fits together. I think that gets really interesting. It's a really interesting and informative and really fun channel. Like I said, you gotta love me. If you love music, he does a great job. My second one is gonna be, I'm actually gonna go back to Dave's idea of video games, because I haven't just been playing Animal Crossing. I haven't just been keeping my 9 to 5 at Nintendo's Island Emporium. I've been trying a lot of little indie games. So, like I said, I've been looking like, hey, this is on sale. So picked up Dead Cells, picked up Hades. But the one that I've been playing most recently, which is kind of funny because it's a game from a few years back, is called, I don't know if I mentioned, it's Return of the Obra Dinn. It was made by the same guy who made this really funky game which you should play called Papers, Please. And the whole idea there is you're playing the border crossing guard, the border crossing flunky at a East Soviet bloc country. And so, but anyway, Return of the Obra Dinn, you play the role of this insurance agent, and you're investigating this ship that just miraculously came back after being lost at sea, but the crew's all dead or missing. So your job is to trace back and discover what was the story that happened to the crew. And all you get is a little notebook with the list, the list of all the crew members and passengers and a couple of photos showing you everybody. And you get a little watch that will rewind time to the moment when somebody passed away. But it's all still images and little, period piece music. And so all of a sudden you're just having to go back in time. What the point is you got to identify what happened to what person, how they died, by what method, and who killed them. And it's kind of like a whodunit. It's very, very completely different because it's there's nobody's shooting at you. Nothing is jumping at you. There is no running. There is no gunning. There is nothing of that. It's very.
This takes you all the way back to you are in a forest. Do you want to go north or south?
Yeah, but there's a moment where you find somebody's remains and you hit the watch, and all of a sudden you see the point of view where that person's slumping over as they're getting shot by a creature emerging from the ocean, or you look back where a giant tentacle rose out of the ocean to grab this person to hoist them up into the air. So stuff like that's happening, but it doesn't quite reveal everything all at once. So forces you to kind of track and backtrack, and you're going up and down the various decks of the ship. So it's I was surprised the other day. I was like, oh, I've been playing this for 4 hours, but then I looked, I'm like, yeah, you get all that excitement when you look at the legend, go, I identify this because you'll only get confirmation that you got it right when you get 3 right in a row. So if you can guess, and some people do guess, but if you get 3 identities right with the method of death and who killed them, you go, okay, you get 3 rights, and slowly you get the revelation of everything that happens. So it's a very cool little trippy game. It's not too expensive. And I said, it's one of those indie things that you go and you just kill time, and you kill a lot of time with.
The games that like I find that are most appealing are the ones that you can just pick up and play for 40 minutes and then put
Mm-hmm.
down.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is like that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can quit it at any time, but it's more along the lines of once you get that sugary treat of, ooh, you solved this, you want to keep going.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to go a little more modern. Some of the stuff we've been talking about has been retro. I'm going TV show Ted Lasso.
Rupert, guys have underestimated me my entire life. And for years, I never understood why. It used to really bother me. But then one day, I was driving my little boy to school, and I saw this quote by Walt Whitman. It was painted on the wall there. It said, "Be curious, not judgmental."
We've watched that start to finish. My wife and I.
Barbecue sauce.
Barbecue sauce. Our oldest daughter has taken a liking to this show. We've rewatched episodes. I think we've seen season 1 like probably 3 times in its entirety at this point. And so it's safe to say we're big fans of it at this point. And I think like it's because the show does so many things right. And that's really the important part of it, which is it's competently put together. Like you think about it just from the idea of the central protagonist, which is somebody who's foreign to this country and the customs and the sport, soccer itself. So you get kind of this kinship with him as an audience member right out of the gate, which is like, well, this is all foreign to me too. I identify with this person. So right there's this connection that's made. And then from that, you get to have all these fun, mishaps that spring forth from this. They can do a lot of fun things with the sport that maybe a show that's a little more steeped in the knowledge and the history of how it's supposed to be played or this, that, and the other. It's like, no, they don't. We don't go into any of that. It's more just like, okay, we're just sort of riffing on those things and we're having fun with them. The characters react to situations in a realistic manner. That's another really big one for me, where you get a typical trope and it's like, oh, our characters are in one of those situations. And so this is how a TV character will respond in this situation. And then they don't do that. They react the way that you or I might react to something. And I think like that subverts expectations. Because you're like, oh yeah, I've seen this where there's a mishap romantically and I know how this is going to play. No, it doesn't play out that way at all. And again, it comes from a place of realism where we can identify with these characters. And it's like, well, that's how I might have reacted, or that's how, I know somebody who would have reacted that way. And so that's another thing about it, in terms of the craftsmanship that goes into this show. And I also wanted to just say, like, I think the positive messaging, and I think that gets a little overtold about this particular show, which is like everybody gravitates towards it. It's like, it's saving my life right now during the pandemic or whatever. And it's like, I think a lot of people attach a lot of meaning to the show that may or may not have been intended in the first place. But I think the reason that I think that people have taken to it in such a way is that the characters are flawed. And so they're deeply relatable in that way, but they're all sort of coming at life from this perspective of trying to do right. Like, do right by themselves, but also do right by others. And so like their hearts are good. And so you've got these characters who are fairly realistic. Their hearts are in the right place. And people are like, wow, this is a breath of fresh air, because I don't see that on television. I don't. And I think like there's something sort of aspirational about seeing people like that on TV, where it's like, wow, I would love to be able to handle my own baggage or my own demons in a way that this character deals with it, because they're flawed, same as us, but they face those failings. And I think like for the most part, there's some exceptions on the show, but for the most part they well, there's one big one this season. But I think like they face their issues and they work to overcome them. And I'm not going to sit here and say this is the perfect show or that everybody will love this show, because I think that's the way to turn Aaron off. But I think there's really good reasoning behind why so many people have gone ape for it. And I'm one of those people. Again, we've watched it all and we'll continue to watch it going forward.
I always wonder how people, and by the way, hand on heart, I'm an avid soccer supporter. I'm a big time Arsenal supporter. So I was already steeped in soccer culture and the parlance, the language. So I always wonder how people who had no idea what, a lot of the vernacular, how they react to it. Because one of the things that I found surprising about Ted Lasso, that first season, is that they're not afraid to go, nope, you totally are the fish out of water. Not just regarding life in another country, which Ted and Coach Beard faced, but also you're playing a completely different sport with completely different parlance, with a different vernacular, with different expectations. And now, I was like, will people get it? But then one of the smart things that Ted Lasso does is that it's not about soccer per se. It's a show about a coach coaching a football team, a soccer team, but it's not about that per se. It's about the dynamics and the relationships. And you're right. I think one of the smartest things that I think Jason Sudeikis and his writing team did is they were cognizant that they were not going to people are not going to get fixed in 30 minutes. Like it happens a lot of times in comedic and sitcoms where, there's a problem, there's some miscommunication, they butt heads, but then everything gets back to normal and everything gets resolved in time for the closing credits. No, they're very willing to leave stuff hanging and leave people how was it the one said, stuff gets broken, and no matter how much how much you say you're sorry, that doesn't put it back together. That's a very adult mentality.
The show is serialized in nature too. Yeah, to your point, which is like it keeps you coming. Yeah, it keeps you coming back week after week after week, because you're like, what next? Like, how are they going to pay off, this particular situation or this particular character dynamic? And they build and they build and they do it in a really smart way. And it's like you said, it's not like a reset button. All right, everything's back to normal. They don't fall into that. So,
well, cool. My next one, kind of short and sweet, is actually LPs. My brother bought me a record player a couple years back. And sent me actually a good chunk of his record collection, and they've just kind of sat there ever since I got them. And but then when we were back for my dad's funeral, my brother and sister and I, after going to a bar and having more than a few beers, we then had to go to the record store because my brother wanted to go to a record store, and we all ended up like just buying a bunch of LPs. And so brought it home, and Brittany and I have actually started listening to LPs more, like when we're cooking in the kitchen or if we're cleaning around the house or whatnot. And there is just something, I'm not going to get up there and say, because people will argue, LPs are better than CDs. CDs are better than blah, 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 blah. the thing is, it all comes down to nostalgia. I remember when my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I would sit there all day long in front of the stereo and looking through records and playing records. And so it's that whole nostalgia factor. There's a warmth to them. It drives me crazy though that the keys are off because of the speed of the turntable. I think it's going a little bit too fast, too slow. Then it doesn't sound right because it's, either sharp or flat. But I mean, that's just been something kind of, so I have been more inclined to like, I would like to have that on LP. I would like to have that on LP, to the point where today I was like, I need to start getting some Beatles stuff on LP, not download it to Apple Music, but it made me think I should just get this on LP because it'd be kind of nice to have. So, but that's been something that's just been a 2021 kind of geek out for us. So, like I said, short and sweet.
Do you do that, Fredo? Do you have enough records? Do you collect?
Yeah. I've gotten back into getting records after a long while of just because for a long time I was just portable and just like digital music. But I found one of the Aaron's points. I think what I've been cognizant of is just because I like an artist or I like a particular song, I don't necessarily get the album. I gotta like the majority, if not the whole album, for me to get it, because it's an experience to put a record and just let it play. I find that that's something that particularly older artists were more cognizant of, that where you put a song in the sequence of the record.
Well, if you fast forward or rewind, you run the risk of ruining your record.
But your listening experience also shifts when you can just simply hit a button and skip that song, and there was an element of selection by the artist, the producer, the engineer, the mixer of, okay, these are the songs we're selecting because we can't put 15, 20, 25 songs. Yeah, we can make a double album, but even that's only 14 songs, 15 songs. So depending on how big you are or how big your album want to be your album, you can only put so many, and you had to be selective as to when, what, where, which song went, so that it really does put you. I mean, it's like a journey. It's an experience when you play a record and you just let it play out, because the artist's like, I'm gonna take you on an adventure with me, and it sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad, sometimes it can be cathartic, but I find that it's a different experience when you do it that way versus when I got my earbuds on and I'm just fast tracking through in Spotify. Different listening experiences.
I guarantee you, to your point about like that sort of curation, more than one producer since the advent of CDs has verbalized the idea that, people have the ability to skip songs nowadays, so we'll worry about the order later or never. And I think like that sort of construction of albums, there's probably just a lot of tug of war with that. And we collect at this point. I got Kate a player like a couple years ago, and so again, it's like there's curation on the audience's part. It's like I want an album. I don't want a record that has 2 songs on it that I like and that's it. That's not what I want. I want the album that I can listen to the whole thing and let it wash over me.
Well, and also reading the jacket, that's part of the deal as well.
Yeah, whenever you got liner notes or lyrics, remember when finding the lyrics of the album was like a big deal.
Yeah.
So, next thing for me on the list, and actually I'm going to go Star Wars, is Star Wars Visions. Look, I love anime. I've always been saying, look, we need a Star Wars anime. We'll be a gangbuster. We got it this year, and I love going back. What I like about the vignette version of it is, it's not like a TV show. It's not like Ted Lasso where you come back next week and see it, and you can see all the episodes. This is something you can, maybe you just feel like watching the first one, The Duel. Boom, see it. Or maybe you feel like seeing a different episode. Boom, you see our vignette. You see that. And I think that does create a dynamic where you can enjoy these little morsefuls of just really good, fun Star Warsy action, told really elegantly and beautifully in different ways. So I've been enjoying going back to like, let me just watch it and, boop, and just watch it and enjoy it.
You know what's interesting? And I think this is the problem with the way they release. It's also my problem. I still have not watched all the episodes of Visions. I enjoyed the ones that I watched, but because it's all there. Just because of my kind of, I'm not diagnosed with ADD. It's just, but because of that nature, it's like, I don't have, it's Wednesday, it's time for my new show. It's like I watched a couple and I just kind of moved on to other things, but I agree with you that it did give me a more appreciation for anime, because I was never really ever turned on. I've said this on the podcast, never really turned on by anime, but I thought this was really kind of cool. And then to see the different, styles of anime. So yeah, it's a very good thing to be geeked out over. That almost made my list, but I left it off because I haven't watched the whole series. But I've watched a couple of those episodes a couple of times. So
I like that we dovetailed out of talking about LPs into talking about that, because in a way that is like consuming an LP or an album. It's just like you can just put it on and just let it sort of just go through, and it washes over you, and each section is different enough to where you get something different, every, however long each section is, like 10 to 15 minutes probably, or maybe a little less than that.
They range from like 10 to, I think the longest one's 19 minutes.
Yeah. And so it's like you get that story for that length of time, and then it's on to something that could be just completely different, right? And again, that's a lot like consuming an album. And so I thought I always would consume those things that way. Once you have it all like together like that, I'll watch it beginning to end. I'm not one of those people that will fast forward to the lightsaber fights in the movie. I'll never do that. I'll watch beginning to end, unless I fall into the middle somewhere, like it's on TV or something. I always try to watch the whole work. But like you said, you got the flexibility. You can do whatever you want with it. Well, on this theme, I'm going to talk about my favorite album this year, and it was Tom Petty's Wildflowers. This is not a new album to probably people of our generation. It's been around quite a while now, but I honestly like it better every single time that I listen to it, and it has never gotten old. And I think it sort of encapsulates what we were talking about. You can put it on and you can listen to it uninterrupted without ever having to skip over anything or turn it off because you're bored with it. You're massively disincentivized from turning it off, because you're like, oh, but this song and this song and this song and this other song are all coming up, so I can't turn it off. I gotta wait until I get to that point. If I were to start a record collection like today, it'd probably be in my like top 5 of albums that I would want to get to start a collection. And Kate got this for me last Christmas, and it was like the super deluxe edition, which it had, it's like I think it had 4 records in there, and you're just, okay, here's another one, and it was like, some studio stuff in there, and it was, it was like the full experience. But I never get tired of it, and it's a great listen, and I recommend it to anybody. It's not like his definitive album.
I was just going to say, looking at the track list, there aren't a lot that you are instantly recognizable to. I mean, probably by title anyway. But because I'm not a huge Tom Petty fan. That doesn't mean I don't like him. I'm just saying I'm not a huge, I know the hits, right?
If you go back and you look at it, this is towards the tail end of what one would consider like his definitive works, right? I think like he really got started in the late 70s, and by the mid 90s he was not done, but most of his best work was already out at that point. And so like this was like on the tail end of that. But it's just such a marvelous collection of songs, because like I think there's just so much variety there. I think like that's part of the reason I really enjoy it. And Aaron, I would encourage you to sit down, because like there'll probably be like 3 or 4 on there. You'll be like, oh yeah, I know this song.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just, just didn't know the name of it, or just hadn't heard it in 15 years because you're not listening to the right radio stations or whatever. But
I know Rick Beato has some Tom Petty stuff on his channel. So interesting thing about Tom Petty, Don Felder, the guitar player for the Eagles, who was responsible for basically writing the music for Hotel California, was Tom Petty's guitar teacher. So there you go. In Florida.
There you go.
Yeah. My next one, actually, I'm going to go into Star Wars as well, Fredo, and it's going to be the Clone Wars. And this is thanks to the Bad Batch and all of the Disney Plus Star Wars content that we've had, basically has made me want to go back, because I first watched the Clone Wars series just because like I need to watch this, and went through it all. Now I find myself going back and rewatching episodes and entire seasons, because of, even because of Rebels, and where I got attached to Captain Rex. And so it's like, what did I miss, when I first watched the Clone Wars, so that's been, I've gained a much broader appreciation for that series than I had a year ago. And again, it's because Dave Filoni's making me want to go back and check out the things that I missed, which is it's a good way to keep money in your pocket, Dave. So yeah, so the Clone Wars has been mine, and I find I enjoy it more and more each time that I watch these episodes. There's more stuff going on that I missed. So
it's interesting. I was watching something, I don't know if it was on YouTube or TikTok or wherever. Somebody like redone like what if Order 66 had failed, and it shows all the Jedi taking out the clones, and I kind of went, if I'd seen that in 2005, I wouldn't have cared. But having seen the Clone Wars, knowing that many of the names of the clones behind them, behind those helmets, it kind of hit me at a different way. It's now, now you're cognizant of who it is that is executing Order 66. And it just kind of, it kind of made me stop and go like, wait a minute, I'm having, you have feelings for the clones now. You care about these characters. And you go like, that's the trick that Dave Filoni pulled with the Clone Wars, is he took this army of faceless, copy paste background characters and gave them life and personality and purpose and ideas and beliefs, and made them matter in a way that they hadn't to me up until that point.
Well, but then the other part of it also is just a broader appreciation for the fall of the Jedi, and also, just the nature of the Force. So like I said, but because of the things we've been talking about and watching on Disney Plus, all the new stuff, it's making me go back and really check out what I missed in the old. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the best things about Star Wars, though, is when you can do that, and it's like, this whole scene has different context now in light of me seeing this other thing. Yeah, That's a lot of fun.
Fredo?
So kind of touching on albums, it's kind of funny because I didn't mean to kind of start rewatching this like crazy. A few weeks back, actually, ZZ Top's bassist, Dusty Hill, passed away. They're a big guy from Houston. So, somehow, some way, I ended up watching a couple of clips on YouTube of their live show in Germany. Which was in 1980. So 3 years before they became one of the biggest bands in the world. And it's so funny because it made me go back and listen to that album, their Live in Germany album, and listen and watch this video. I mean, by this point, for those of you that don't know, the Reverend Billy Gibbons, the guitarist, main songwriter, ZZ Top, was Jimi Hendrix's favorite guitar player. Like, he's one of, because he was a studio guitarist for the longest time. And so he got together with these two other guys and formed a blues rock band, and they kicked around for 15, 16 years before they became famous. But anyway, there was this show that they did in Germany at, you might know the name of the show, TV show, Dave, Rocktaplast. I don't know if it was supposed to be some sort of German TV show where they would put like 3 or 4, foreign bands on TV, like late night Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so they got him there in 1980, like I said, 3 years before the Eliminator album comes out. And they're just playing like their stuff like LaGrange and Jesus Just Left Chicago and Just Got Paid and Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers and Touch, and just seeing them before they became big is kind of like, because they're way more, the synth sound hadn't entered the picture, so it's very much blues rock based. But it's so enthralling watching them because it's like you're seeing somebody before they became that somebody that they became, and that's always exciting and interesting to me.
I love it. Yeah. Well, we were talking about that stuff with the Beatles, like those sort of intimate portraits and understanding what goes into the art and how does a band like hit it big in that way? Somebody posed that question the other day on Twitter. It's just like, if a song doesn't hit it big, does that like decrease its value in some way? Because I think like this song is one of the greatest songs of all time. I don't even remember what the song was, but like it was an interesting philosophical question because all songs are that way until they hit, and so yeah, it is kind of fun just to like go back and like, so you're almost like a voyeur.
Well, and you mentioned the Beatles thing, and it's again the Rick Beato channel that I mentioned. He'll get into this, and it's not to say that our music that we all grew up with is better, but you had to be a hell of a lot better musician to make these recordings, because a lot of these vocal takes, they're one takes. The band is playing all at the same time. It's not layering in one instrument at a time. There was no quantizing anything. It was, just you played. And you had to sing in tune, you had to play in tune, and you had to play right. And like I said, a lot of this stuff was one take. You couldn't just punch in like you can now. So I do have a greater appreciation sometimes for those things, like you said.
And for a lot of these bands, they were honing their craft to play live. They're putting out an album not because they wanted to sell. They wanted to sell the album, but it was to get on the road and he may play shows. And that's one of the things that hits me. It's like, again, Billy Gibbons now in his 70s, but back then, young Billy Gibbons with the long beard still all black, but he's running around a stage with a guitar, playing it in tune and on note, and he's not missing a beat whatsoever. And that kind of musical athleticism, to put it that way, doesn't come from anything but repeating that process over and over and over hundreds of shows over years on the road. You can't fake that.
Yeah. Dave, what's next on your list?
So I've gone back and I've rewatched all the old Spider-Man movies with my kids. And so like that's a bit of a communal pick in that regard, because like we got to experience it together and we did something together and it was fun. But I also have gained a new appreciation for those movies. It's just like going back and watching them over again. particularly the first Sam Raimi film, which is just sort of crazy and bonkers. Like it was really impressive, like how stylized this was, and some of the over the top performances. Like it was like he had a paintbrush and was just like going to town on a canvas, like arm flailing about, because it was just he was like, he had a vision, and it's on the screen and you see it clear as day. And I challenge somebody to like go back and watch this movie and not just be like completely enthralled by William Dafoe and the maniacal performance that he gives in this film. Like, it's like an all-time great. It's like we all just laugh about like General Zod, kneel before Zod, right? In terms of like classic movie lines and movie villains in these superhero movies. But like Dafoe having Aunt May like pray to God, literally, as he's like hovering over her. Yeah. Hovering. It's incredible. Like this stuff's really, really fun. And I guess I got caught up in some of the competing canon. Is this canon? Is this canon? This continuity might be different. And like for a time I'm like, well, that bothers me, but now it doesn't bother me. Now they're gonna fold all of it in.
I was gonna say, I love how Marvel gave themselves the easiest out on the planet.
Oh yeah. And again, maybe that's a cheat, and maybe the new movie's no good. Who knows? But I will say, it's like if you go back and you watch those movies, I think you'll be entertained. Like even the Amazing Spider-Man movies were really entertaining movies. You have to commit to it a little bit. They have their downsides. They have their stretches of emo angst, etc. But they get to the point eventually, and they're good when they do.
So my last one is dovetails off of that a little bit, and that's I'm just going to say Marvel properties. You guys have ruined me because of the project that I had back in 2020. Now through 2021, I've noticed, like, I've joked that Star Wars is always on like TNT or whatever, but if it's not Star Wars, it's Marvel. And now it's to the point where if there is a Marvel movie on TV and I'm just kind of channel surfing, I will land on that movie and I will watch it and I will enjoy it. And then, Brittany and I look forward to, Hawkeye that just came out, and, all the WandaVisions and the Falcon and Winter Soldiers and all that. So it's almost made me, because I do have the Marvel app on my iPad, because I've been reading some of the Star Wars stuff. It's almost made me, but I know this is going to be I'm just going to get lost in the room of requirement if I even venture into getting into the comic books. But it's like I'm this close to getting, like, maybe I should start just reading, Captain America. Let's see what happens, But
we need to give him some recommendations, Dave. Some of the arcs to kind of touch upon, some runs.
But I mean, like I said, you guys, that's just one that has become one of my go-tos. Like I said, if it's on TV, it's like, all right, I'm going to watch it, So yeah, that's not a lot to say there, but
no, it seems like if it's not Star Wars weekend on TNT, it's Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame on TNT.
Yeah.
It's like every other weekend.
You can't escape it, man. It's always on. And that's how they get you, because they're like, oh, people love these movies. They're going to stop.
And Harry Potter's over on whatever it is, Freeform. Yeah. So, Fredo, what's your last one?
Yeah, for my last one, I'm actually gonna go with a podcast, and don't worry, it's not a Star Wars podcast. Besides ours, it's a podcast called Old Gods of Appalachia. It's a horror anthology podcast that came out, I want to say last year. I found it last year when it was beginning was debuting, and then I barreled through the first season, and then I've been listening to second season. It's only about 29 episodes. It's the whole concept behind it. It's written by a couple of local authors out in North Carolina. It's kind of like an alternate take history for the Appalachian region, but it's horror anthology. So it's inspired by like Lovecraft, and inspired by Stephen King, and inspired by all a lot of the history. So it's beautiful the way they wrap around the idea of, say, like the abuse of coal mine companies, and little store towns that disappeared with ancient witches living in the woods, and monsters buried in the sand, buried underneath the mountain, that every time they dig up, they're unearthing and they need sacrifice, and how they even encapsulate the idea of trains as reconnecting and waking up old monsters and whatever. Like the last one was hilarious. The last one was a Thanksgiving, no, it's a Halloween themed one. And it was about this nurse who keeps finding giant pumpkins growing in her backyard, and she goes out there and cuts them all up. And the next morning, there's twice as many, and they're just taking over her yard and taking over the front of her house. And so it's and they wrap it all up into the history of Appalachia. It's really well written, really well researched, really well performed. If you like horror stories and like horror anthologies and stuff like that, I can't recommend it enough. It's a really great little thing. And again, they do a really good job of being truthful to the real history of the states that make up the Appalachian region, and the realities of some of the horrible history that they've had to deal with at the hands of other people. So, but it's really, really well done, really excellent. I can't recommend it enough. Very, very progressive, also, I'll say, for how it tackles a lot of topics.
That's cool. No, that sounds cool. I'll check it out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm scared to death of pumpkins now. Thanks, man.
Look, you go back there, you cut one out, you cut out the roots, and then you come back and there's two. You might be worried.
Yeah, no, that's there's something very basic about that fear of it just coming back twice as strong. Hydra.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So my last one is going to be a little bit of reality television. The Real World Homecoming for New York, which I watched, I think it was in late spring when it came out.
I only watched the first episode of that. I guess because that was the only one I could find on YouTube. Do you guys have Paramount Plus?
Yeah.
Okay, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's on Paramount Plus, and it's like I think that's one of the cheaper services that you can subscribe to, and you can probably, I think they have a free trial, and you can quit it, and so it's not really that big of a pain to try to add it if you don't have it. And they got all the Star Trek stuff there too, if Star Trek appeals. But
Week 2.
Yep. Yeah, but so like we got pulled into this. Kate was really gung ho about watching this, and there goes the timer. And so I was like, yeah. I mean, we both grew up with this, and I guess one part of the reason that I recommend this and really enjoyed it is because it deals with some of that history, which is that this is one of those first brave new steps into reality television. And so if you want an understanding of why this took over our television sets, this is a really good place to kind of get a little bit of that history and a little bit of that insight. And we watched a few of these nostalgia-based reunion shows this year. There were a bunch of these that came out. There was a Friends one and a Fresh Prince one. But I think like this is the one that really stood out for me. And I think it's not just because of like the historical importance. Those were sitcoms. This was kind of a new thing. Real World was. And so like I think it's really kind of an important thing for people to understand just on that basis. But I also feel like what really just like drew me in and why we enjoyed it as much as we did is because it deals with, it goes back and it shows you a lot of the stuff that they were talking about 30 years ago, and it's the same stuff that we're dealing with right now today. I mean, it's just like your jaw drops at varying points, just seeing it laid out in that way. Like, oh my gosh,
And you think you've come so far, and you haven't gone far at all.
we haven't moved the needle at all. And for somebody, if you're a Gen Xer like us, you're like, wow. I mean, like, I feel like we're making a difference, or I feel like we were a special generation that was poised to make a difference. And then you see, like, we're still dealing with the same stuff. And so, like, there's this weight that comes with that realization when you're watching this, but there's also kind of a hopefulness that comes out of it as well, because what I found when I was watching this is that I found that I identified with different people on the show this time around than I did the first time around. The first time around, maybe I was younger, I was a little more shallow, I was less interested in politics and in hearing different viewpoints from other people that didn't look like me. And this time around, it was the polar opposite. And and I think, like, it's, if you experience the show the first time around, I think you almost have to sit down at some point and watch this, because you're going to have those sorts of experiences. You're going to feel like, what is the same? Oh my gosh, this is the same stuff. And what is different in you? How have you changed? And it's like this Enterprise, the reality television thing, it's like it's now a constant. It was there then, it's there now, it's not going away. But how do we process these things differently, and how do we maybe begin to make changes ourselves? And so,
And
there's some resonance.
Real World killed the video star.
It did
But in
that.
a way, yeah, and in a way, you can make a straight line from that Real World first season in New York all the way through to social media and TikTok and YouTube and everything else that we got today.
Yeah.
Because it's very much that concept of, no, this is no longer planned, this is now real life, this is no longer actors, these are people. And now we've even, you don't even need a studio or need a camera set or whatever. Your camera's your phone, you post, or whatever you got, you hit record, throw it online, and we all become stars. We all become the entertainment for everybody else. And it's surprising the impact that it's had even so many years later, just because I don't think anybody would have perceived it back then. I think we just thought, okay, it's a neat little thing and it'll go. But
Well, and
it's still with us.
And I said it half jokingly, but that was that's when MTV totally shifted its focus.
Yep.
You got fewer and fewer videos, and you got more and more of these reality shows, and to the point where now you get like an hour of videos a day, or you have to go on MTV Classic. So,
or YouTube.
Yeah.
My wife and I have this like brain melding moment with Real World. It's like we sit around, we talk about these things, and it's like one or the other of us came up with this idea, and I can't tell you who it was. I think it's me, she thinks it's her, but we both repeat it all the time. And it's like the Real World San Francisco was a real turning point with this stuff, because you had Pedro Zamora, who was this AIDS, activist, like, let's make people aware that this is a real issue with real faces attached to it. And then you had Puck, who was just me, look at me. Ultimate social media star prior to social media existing. And it's like, you could go this one direction where you're trying to make a difference and you're trying to help, or you could go this other direction where it's me. And I think we all kind of know which direction
went the
this
wrong
stuff.
way.
Yeah, we know what direction this stuff took.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that meme where you see, the evolution of humanity, and there's someone going around, turn around, we messed up, go back. So you can't tell us whether this was from Manhattan or from whatchamacallit, from what's that game? It's Tuscaloosa, where this idea was born. No, but it's a true statement. I mean, I think that was the first time that particularly that third season, because by season Seattle, whatever, it just become ever present. It was just a show.
Yeah, it was just a bunch of people partying in the house. Eventually, is what it became.
Fighting and
and let's manufacture fights.
I think that was the last season 3 was the last one where they really went. We're gonna actually get really real life people and let them get together and really let them get at one another's positions and opinions. I think that because of the reality of what they encounter between Pedro and I forget the other guy's name. I can't remember. Puck, thank you. Once they encounter the duality of that, they're like, this is great, but this made us all look like major league buttholes. So we are never allowing this to happen in unscripted again. We're taking over this from here on out.
But the stuff in New York is great. And they go back and you look at it, some of the things, and again, some of that messaging was lost on 15-year-old Dave, but it's not lost on 40-year-old Dave. So
yeah, it's interesting. Like me going to see Rent the other day. It's like a lot of that stuff, back in 1996 would have sailed right over 18, 19-year-old me. Now that I'm in my 40s and aware of what they're speaking of, it's a different perception and appreciation of it.
So those are, I guess, that's the end of our list of our favorite things, at least our top 5 of 2021. Hit us up on Twitter. What are the things that are geeking you out this year that you find yourself going back to? Or if you check out some of the things that we mentioned, let us know what you think of them. And I guess until then, we will say who dat?
Who dat?
Who dat?
And I hope you enjoyed my dogs barking in the background. And they and I will, and all of us will be back next week. See you later.
McConkey.